2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. It was a wonderful ride down the mountain. And you know what? Right here on the webcam, I am going to enjoy Mr. Rooney's cookies, along with some delicious Royal Farms coffee out of my Cole Roofing mug. Luke Jones, a victory coming back from Pittsburgh. I tell you what, my wife, I got home about 11:01. I said 11 o'clock. I literally walked in the door at 11:01. My wife had the football game on. Mahomes is losing and whatnot. And she's like, hey, how was the day? And I'm like, kind of long, but kind of short. Like, I don't know that I've ever driven 5 hours to Pittsburgh and 4 hours back or whatever it was and had it. We went right to the parking lot. We went in. We won the football game, as I promised. As I said on my the audio pieces I did, it's always a 23-20 game is what I said, literally, on the way up. It's always a 23-20 game. And overtime, you win, you come back. It felt like kind of a short trip when you win up there, right?
Yeah, it always feels better after a win, no matter how strange it might be, whether it's overtime. We know most of these games are close, even in years where there's some key absences because of injury or what have you. But it makes that trip, which isn't a long trip. I mean, obviously the players fly, and it's not exactly a long trip, but it definitely makes for a much more pleasant up and back when you're talking about a victory. And certainly you'll take being 3-2 and in first place in the division over being 1-4 and starting to look at historical examples of teams that have started 1-4 and rebounding to make the playoffs. Spoiler alert, there aren't very many. So that's what Pittsburgh is dealing with, in addition to looking at potentially playing their third-string quarterback here, at least for the foreseeable future, with Mason Rudolph with the concussion.
Well, we talked about Lamar, we've talked about Tony Jefferson, and certainly the injury and Earl Thomas knocking their quarterback out. The linebacker position for the Ravens has been something that, the minute C.J. Mosley in the middle of the night signed with the New York Jets, I think you and I realized, maybe they'll go get, the guy they got from Jacksonville, when Ray Lewis disappeared for 5 minutes, go get a veteran guy. Or maybe they'll play with Kenny Young, or, maybe Peanut's ready for this. Or, Josh Bynes being out on the field to start the game in Pittsburgh when he was watching games on TV last week, right? And I caught up with him in the locker room, and I had sort of the microphone in front of him. Not only was he in, I'm at his locker after the game talking to him about playing a lot of snaps. I didn't see the snap count on it, but he was out there plenty, and enough to be in the right place at the right time when the ball popped up in the air to begin the game. Seeing a 57 run around out there in the middle, for a minute it looked like C.J. Mosley, right?
Yeah, it definitely brought some flashbacks there, and I'm guessing some casual fans were kind of wondering what was going on for a few moments. But, it's a credit to Josh Bynes, because the fact that he hadn't played a game since last November, he finished his last season in Arizona on IR, he was cut in March, was not with the team in the spring and summer, to be signed to do the amount of prep. And I know he downplayed it, and I understand he was a Raven from 2011 through 2013, but the defensive system's changed a good bit since then. It's still at its core the Ravens' defense, but we talked about this a whole lot last year with the changes that Wink Martindale made to Dean Pease' defensive system. For him to, one, be in the kind of game shape, and two, the mental preparation to play 43 of 60 defensive snaps on Sunday really says something about him, but it says even more about where the Ravens are at the inside linebacker position right now. They deactivated Kenny Young. Chris Board played one snap. Those were the guys that were platooning at the weak side spot. Patrick Owasso moved to what was his old position, the weak side spot, at least part-time. In some sub-packages, Bynes came off the field and Owasso stayed on the field, so he assumed more of the Mike role then. But it was very clear with the moves they made, and remember, they also added L.J. Fort, a guy who's played in Pittsburgh not too long ago. But it was clear by adding two inside linebackers, deactivating Kenny Young entirely, and Chris Board being limited to special teams on all but one defensive snap. It really does speak to their disenchantment, and I think it also does speak to what had to be a miscalculation on the Ravens' part. You mentioned it. I thought from the moment that C.J. Mosley walked out the door, and we've said this over and over, would I have paid him $17 million a year? Absolutely not. I also would have tried to sign him a year earlier when he was ready, seemed very ready to talk contract, and nothing really happened over that time period leading up to the hidden free agency last March. But that's water under the bridge. When he left, I assumed the Ravens would make a Darryl Smith kind of acquisition. Not Darryl Smith himself, but that kind of guy. Someone.
I always forget his name, by the way. That I always want to call him Al Smith, and Al Smith was a Houston Oilers linebacker who's in my phone.
Yeah.
And he kind of reminded me of Al Smith. He came in and kind of had this sort of mini Singletary sort of demeanor about him. I mean, he was all business. He was a grown-up.
Yeah.
He kind of reminded you of like a social studies teacher.
I don't know where that's coming from, but
like a grown-up,
right.
Like he literally came in and at a time when they needed a grown-up. And I don't want to say this team has Earl Thomas, right, and it's just lost Tony Jefferson, but to think that a team that thinks it's a playoff team is going to go out on the street and sign linebackers and bring them into Pittsburgh on the road in Week 5 and put them on the field to start when they weren't in a uniform 5 days earlier. That is probably desperation would be that's the definition of that, right?
Has to be desperation. I mean, that's desperate. I mean, it really is. And look, I mean, Josh Bynes, without having rewatched the game to focus solely on him, we'll see how it looked, but certainly didn't stick out in a negative way. And to your point, even though I would say Matt Judon's pressure on Jalen Samuels caused that interception more so than a great play by Josh Bynes, but he was in position to make the play, and that's what you like to see, and that's something that
he's played a lot of football. He just hasn't played a lot of football lately.
Exactly,
right?
And again, it's not a knock on Josh Bynes. It's a reflection on where they are at that position, and the Ravens feeling that going out and signing a veteran guy who hadn't played all spring or summer and starting him against your biggest rival in your division in a game that wasn't quite must-win, but really could use that win to stop the bleeding and not letting this thing spiral out of control early on. To start him and play him that much, I mean, that says a lot about where they are at that position. But it worked out okay. He'll have another week now to get his legs under him even more and learn the defense even more. And I'm guessing, I would assume he played well enough that you're going to continue to see him out there. And Kenny Young and Chris Board, well, sorry, you guys had opportunities. And
boy, this is getting the list is getting longer, right? Like Arthur Jones, we go through. I mean, we talk about the wide receiver position, but boy, drafting linebackers in this system for what they want them to do. And it's a weird position, right? Because it's gone through transitions of you want bigger, you want smaller, you want faster, you want coverage, you want run stop, you want, do you want a strong safety or do you want Ray Lewis? What do you want? And, the way they morph the defense and the way that they have all of these sub-packages, right, that it's a very complicated place to play, and they've managed to take really well thought of football players, right? Like if Kenny Young didn't get drafted by the Ravens, somebody else was going to take him right around then, right? That in this system, but to John Simons, there's just been a lot of struggle for linebackers around here. And I would turn back the clock and say, it's 2013, Ray Lewis is leaving. How do you think that's going to go in the aftermath, right? But the fact that CJ did it and nobody else has really been able to, now, Zach Orr for, a minute while he was healthy enough to do it, looked to be the guy. But this is, we're still talking about Ray Lewis 7 years later, and Mosley's gone, and we're signing guys off the street to play in Pittsburgh. It's weird, but Josh Bynes, by the way, luckily he was available. I mean, he was always a real high-character guy and a guy they liked coming out of Auburn and went on and played a little bit, but he wasn't even like a starter when he was a starter, right?
Right. I mean, when he was with the Ravens the first time around, remember, he filled in a little bit when Ray Lewis and Donnell Ellerbe were hurt late in that 2012 season. 2013, he played a little bit more. That was the year Jameel McClain was coming back from the neck injury, and he was playing next to Darryl Smith. So I'll say this. I'll disagree with you a little bit in the sense that they've continued to find those rookie free agent kind of backers at a really successful rate. When you do look at Zach Orr, Patrick Owasso, early season struggles at the Mike spot aside, he's been a very successful, a rookie free agent, former safety in college that you've made into a linebacker. That's been successful.
Well, Jameel was another guy that was successful, right? I mean, Jameel was another guy that really played well.
Yeah. I mean, but to your point, Arthur Brown, second-round pick, they traded up for in 2013, and Kenny Young. And look, let's be clear, he's early in his second season, so I don't want to give up on the guy yet. But I think it's shown, and I think you made an excellent point in kind of assessing what the inside linebacker position is in 2019, and I think there was something to that from the standpoint of the Ravens saying, okay, we're not paying C.J. Mosley $17 million. We were in on him. We were trying to sign him. We would have paid him 12 or 13, maybe 14, but it just, it got to the point where it was just too rich for our blood, and we made a business decision. So what do we do here? Do we go out and sign another veteran type that's of that mold, even though not going to be a four-time Pro Bowl player? Or do we lean into some of those changes within the game that you were mentioning of wanting more speed at that position, wanting more athleticism at that position? You don't really think about inside linebackers being the, quote, thumper in the way that you thought of, say, a Levon Kirkland or someone like that. So the Ravens, in their judgment, right or wrong, and I think it speaks for itself, it's turned out to be wrong to this point. They thought, well, let's go with the younger, faster, smaller, more athletic guys. But I think what they didn't take into account for was that Patrick Owasso going from a part-time, kind of 50% weak side inside linebacker role to being the 100% Mike linebacker on the field every single play and having the responsibilities of wearing the green dot headset in your helmet and relaying the calls to the defensive huddle. That was a heck of a lot to put on his plate. And at least at this point in time, he wasn't ready for that. That's why they shifted the green dot helmet to Tony Jefferson in week 4. So was there a miscalculation there on him being ready for a expanded role and for Kenny Young and Chris Board to kind of be what Owasso and Kenny Young were last year in kind of that platoon, along with Anthony Levine coming on the field in the dime package at that spot? I think you'd have to say that because the Ravens have shown you that they feel that way by going out and signing L.J. Fort, by signing Josh Bynes, by deactivating Kenny Young and Chris Board only playing one snap in Pittsburgh on defense. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm not ready at all to say that Josh Bynes is just going to be the starter for the rest of the year, but that's where they are right now. And at the very least, you're hoping that perhaps this is a little bit of a message sent to Young, sent to Chris Board, and also Owasso, who is very clearly has seen his role change, even if his playing time is not decreasing. You hope maybe it's a little bit of a message. I don't know if you'd call it a wake-up call, but at least a message that, hey, we need to be better here, guys, and if you're not going to be the one to do it, we're going to look at someone else, and you're going to be down on game day. So you hope that there's some improvement internally there, but I think it's very obvious that, and I think you could make an argument, as much as we focused on the secondary, as much as we focused on the pass rush, I think their issues at inside linebacker could very well be impacting both of those phases of your defense as well. And I think you have safeties that have tried to account for liabilities at backer, and when you have inside linebackers who don't have the same feel, maybe aren't playing their assignments correctly, you have your run fits that those guys haven't gotten right over the last couple weeks, that's going to impact your pass rush, and that's going to impact Wink Martindale's thinking on how much you might blitz or how you blitz or where that's coming from. So I think you can make an argument, and that's not to say the pass rush doesn't need help. It's not to say they don't need help in the secondary, but I think there's a very sound argument to be made that all of their problems stem, at least in large part, if not, not exclusively, but a significant part really stems from how weak they've been at inside linebacker overall.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. And as I guess you said, and we, all things aside, this is the new world order, right? I mean,
yeah.
Josh Bynes is here, played well enough certainly to earn another week against Cincinnati. I don't want to say this week's a bye week, but you better not lose to the Bengals this week at home. And you look at 4-2 in Seattle down the road, and we talk about Jimmy Smith, and we talk about what's coming back, and Tony Jefferson's not coming back. I want to get to Lamar and the offense and where we are in all of this because, Mark Andrews, again, sort of shaken up again. And, the training room's getting full now. I mean, Hollywood Brown was limping around a little bit after the game as well. And, everybody's going to play coy on the injury side. But the offense isn't the juggernaut that it looked to be against Miami. Certainly not bad, but certainly in the second half against a formidable defense. They come into a game plan for Lamar now, and the Ravens don't have the same game plan they had last year. It's not bumper cars anymore. Lamar's not looking to run the ball 18 times. Lamar really is looking to throw the football. Throw a couple of picks, some his fault, some is not, ball up in the air, and he'll go back and assess all of that. But they are going to make him throw the football more, and they do want him to throw the football more. And then there comes the point where, someone's got to go catch it. People need to be open. All the normal parts of the offense that we didn't see last year in a passing offense have to function. And I don't know that we've really seen that through 5 weeks in any sort of consistent way. And when the two stars of the operation, as I see it, Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews, those are the guys that to me have the ceiling, right? The Willy Wonka ceiling, right? For them to not be healthy right now, got to get through this week. Got to somehow find a way to get on a plane and go 6 hours out to Seattle and try to steal a game against a team that might be a Super Bowl team, right? Like they might be really good. So next week looks to be challenging for sure. But where will this offense find itself in the second half, and where will some level of consistency beyond we sometimes can get 8 yards on first down if we run the ball the right way?
Yeah, and let's be clear about this. I mean, the offense. They were. You score 59 points. First of all, you're not doing that every week in the NFL. I mean, that's just we know that. That was you're talking about a Dolphins team that lost against the bye week. I mean, that's how bad they are. But I think what we've seen since then is for portions of games, for halves, we've seen the offense play really well. I mean, look at Sunday. First 3 possessions, field goal, touchdown, touchdown. You'll take that. I mean, 17 points in, what was that, about 18 minutes of action, whatever it was at that point in time. I mean, it was really encouraging to see. And you're thinking, wow, I mean, this is what you want to see. But it bogged down after that. And I think you mentioned that the injury to Marquise Brown, even though he did come back later in the game, wasn't particularly effective. But he was back on the field, so that's good to see, even if he's limited this week, even if there's some question about how close to 100% he is. But not having him on the field, I think, really changes what this offense looks like from a passing standpoint. I think you don't have that speed guy. Willie Snead's not scaring anybody from a vertical standpoint. Same with Seth Roberts, even though he was open late in regulation and Lamar Jackson didn't hit him, and the ball needed to come out a little bit sooner than it did, and I think they might have had a touchdown there. But without Marquise Brown out there, and you mentioned Andrews, even though he came back, and I don't know how serious that is. He came back in the game, so you would assume he's okay, but we know he's dealt with the foot. I mean, that's something he's dealt with since week 2. We saw how tremendous he was the first couple weeks of the season, and we've seen him since then not be as productive. Still productive, but not as productive. And we've seen this offense not be able to put anything close to a full 60 minutes together since then. I mean, you look back to Kansas City, you look against Cleveland, they scored a combined 13 points in the first half of those 2 games. So you put yourself on the 8 ball. And then it was the opposite on Sunday. The Ravens scored 17 points in the first 19 minutes of that game, and you're thinking, oh, wow, this is what you're looking for, especially against the defense. It looks pretty good on paper, knowing that Pittsburgh front and adding Minkah Fitzpatrick and some of the talent they have. Certainly more talent on their defense than their offense at this point. But then after that, it really bogged down, and it just wasn't where it needed to be. You mentioned Lamar running the ball. Him running was the only consistent running that they got. I mean, Mark Ingram averaged 2.3 yards per carry. Gus Edwards, I give him a heck of a lot of credit for avoiding that safety down at the 1 yard line. I mean,
well, that would have been a game changer, right?
Oh, of course. I mean, that could have been the game right there. So give him credit, but he didn't find much running room. Justice Hill wasn't very involved; only had a couple carries. They didn't run between the tackles, which I'm not stunned by that, given how talented that Pittsburgh defensive line is. But it just spoke to how difficult life was for the Ravens after those first three drives. First three drives looked great, and you're saying to yourself, hey, they might win this one going away. I mean, who knows? I mean, they were up 17-7, 18, 19 minutes into the game, and then the offense kind of just went away, and Lamar couldn't connect on some of those passes down the field, and Marquise Brown wasn't out there to make the secondary back off and create some more throwing lanes, and guys weren't getting open, and some of the times where guys were open, Lamar didn't deliver a very good pass, and I mentioned they didn't run the ball very effectively. So, you kind of look at what happened after those first three possessions, when interception, punt, interception, field goal, which that was a good drive, end of the third into the start of the fourth quarter, 77-yard drive. That was good to see. And then after that, punt, field goal. And, those two field goals at the end, while I give Justin Tucker a lot of credit and I give Marlon Humphrey a lot of credit, you think about the one at the end of regulation, they did just enough. I don't want to be too critical of the offense, but that roughing the passer on Lamar Jackson, that for as much as we talked about some of the plays that went against the Ravens on Sunday, that one went for them because I didn't think that was a hit below the knees. That looked more like the thighs to me, or lower thighs at least, let's say. So they were very much aided on that one, and, well, in overtime, they went 3 and out to start overtime, and then the game-winning field goal, they moved the ball 6 yards after the forced fumble and recovery. So, they didn't do a whole lot after those first 17, 18 minutes of the game. You'd look at the first three drives and say, well, that's what they're capable of doing, but they've got to find a way to prolong that prosperity and not just really get to a point where they're just fizzling out, or was the case in week 3 and week 4, didn't do a whole lot early, and then in the second half came on, but by that point, you put yourself in a position that things aren't going so great for you. So it has, I think some of the talk about it being revolutionary, probably pump the brakes on that based on how it's gone the last couple weeks.
It's revolutionary when you play Miami.
Yeah, sure. I mean, anyone can look revolutionary against Miami, I suppose. But hey, there's still a lot to like. But they got to find more consistency. And to be clear, I'm not saying they need to score on every single drive. I'm not saying that should be the expectation either. But you score 17 points in your first 3 drives, and then you only managed 3 field goals after that, and one of those field goals aided by a big penalty, and the other one, you were set up on a really short field. And also, I guess I'd be remiss if I'm talking about that. Their first touchdown came on a short field after the turnover. So, the defense, for as much as they've been maligned, they did some big things that helped an offense that was okay on Sunday, but had some stretches of that game where they were not very good. So it has to get better. It's fine against a team that is playing their third-string quarterback. It'll be fine against Cincinnati. But to your point, Seattle coming up. They have
Russell Wilson and Tom Brady. That's it. Enough said, right? That's what's coming down the pipe 2 weeks from now.
Exactly, because if you're struggling at times to stop Kyler Murray in week 2, and even though I have a higher opinion of Baker Mayfield, but he's still a young quarterback playing in Baltimore last week, and Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges, They didn't make a lot of plays, but they made some plays, and that's something that's kind of unheard of.
Devlin Hodges sounds like my stockbroker, man.
Yeah. So if those guys are able to do things against you, then what is Russell Wilson going to do? What is Tom Brady going to do? And the long story short on that, you're going to need your offense to be on point. You're going to need your offense to go win you some football games. I mean, it's that simple. Yeah, you're hoping the defense can continue to maybe build on some of the improvement they made in Week 5, but Seattle, New England, look at Deshaun Watson in Houston, what he's capable of doing. We know what the Rams are capable of, even if they haven't had as much consistency. And you still have to go to Buffalo, which the Bills are surprisingly 4-1, and you have San Francisco coming in, and the 49ers have been pretty impressive early in the season.
Yeah, some of the games we circled in April and said, like Pittsburgh now at the end is sort of like, I mean, they might be on a 4-string quarterback. But I know Roethlisberger's not coming back.
Right.
So,
I mean, you're hoping that the Ravens, maybe
Colin Kaepernick might be their quarterback in December. They might be good,
Yeah. So, but there are some games on that schedule that I don't want to say, because I want to be careful here because this is a young Ravens team, and I picked them to go 9-7. I picked them to make the playoffs as a wild card team. I originally picked Pittsburgh to win the division before what happened to Ben Roethlisberger. So I think it's a young team. I think there's very clearly flaws. I think those flaws are way more pronounced on the defensive side of the ball, so it does make for kind of a bizarro version of the Ravens in that way. But you do look at the schedule, and are there winnable games? Yeah, of course. I mean, I think they're capable of beating most teams in this league. But in order to do that, they've got to make some improvements, and they've got to get much better defensively, but they need to become more consistent, more complete on offense to be able to play more of a 60-minute game. You're not getting it done against Seattle, in Seattle, by having one good quarter of offense and then kind of piddling out after that. You're certainly not beating New England like that, and that New England defense is really tough. So that'll be an interesting test for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. So we can we'll have plenty of time to talk about the rest of the schedule. But long story short, you look at the Cincinnati game, and there are a couple others left on the schedule. Certainly that you say definite win, but you look at there are plenty of games left where you say it's more coin flip or the Ravens are going to be an underdog. So there's a lot of work to be done. They're in fine position. 3-2 you'll take. 4-1 would be better. 5-0 would be better. But hey, the other team tries too. So they've got work to do. But you'll take that kind of an answer when you come away with a win in Pittsburgh rather than what would have been let's face it, a pretty embarrassing loss if you lose to Devlin Hodges on a day where you did some things to hurt yourself with turnovers, penalties, things of that nature that you shoot yourself in the foot on a few occasions.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke. He is in Owings Mills all week long. We're watching baseball. Some hockey's on. We got the Cincinnati Bengals coming in. Seattle next week. Lots of things happening around here. All of it brought to you by our friends at Adams Extreme Motorsports. I'll tell you what, they have lift kits up there going on. We've had our listeners go up there, talk to Galen about buying these. 410-879-5800. If you are a Jeep person, if you love Jeeps, if you want to test drive a Jeep, get out. This is a time to do it. Adams Extreme Motorsports. Let them build your dream Jeep today. They got incredible software. I learned all about it. Roost Chris, speaking about being on point, had some dinner at Roost Chris last week with some Super Bowl 35 champions. Plan your private event at Roost Chris. The holidays are coming. Annapolis, Odenton, Pikesville for happy hour, downtown for dinner this weekend. Come on down and see me at Roost Chris Pier 5. Curio Wellness, our friends up in Timonium. I did a little Purple Friday appearance up there. The Holistic Spa, top-of-the-line products, experienced pros, and cannabis education. That's what they do. York Road, just south of Timonium Road. This week we will hear from my man Brian Sanderhoff and learn more about the Curio Way. We've been talking about the vaping issues as well. Hammer and Nails. I'm not wearing my Hammer and Nails shirt today. I should be. That's the Ultimate Man Cave Nirvana. They're up in Owings Mills. Manicure, pedicure, TVs, adult beverages, hot towels. Shave, relax, hang out. If you're in Owings Mills, it's on the town center. Stop by and see our friends at Hammer and Nails. I'll get the shirt on a little later on in the week. And I do want to give some love. My lava lamp is functioning. The purple Victory lava lamp from Sporticulture. Big thanks to Court, our friends at Sporticulture. You can find them at a lot of their stuff is at Poor Boys. So if you're at a Poor Boys and you see some of the Ravens novelties, a lot of that Sporticulture stuff, all the flowers as well from our pal Court. Learn more at sporticulture.com. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. Hope to see you for my 51st birthday celebration next Tuesday. Bradley Bozeman going to join us out at Greenmount Station. We'll be in Carroll County. Be telling you about that all week long. Big week ahead with Cincinnati in town. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Baltimore Positive, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.